discourse seminar, how to communicate in a way that allows for us to be understood and to seek first to understand. So typically I go all across the country to train, but I thought this would be a way for me to help serve and be a part of a conversation that's important. So I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to learning and growing with you.
Yes, hello. Beginning with West Asheville, we've seen a 2% increase overall in crime. It increases in simple assaults, burglary, and shoplifting over last month's numbers. Burglary picked up particularly on Haywood Road around exit 44, and shoplifting mainly along Smoky Park Highway. The highest concentration of violent crime was in the Piscoview apartments, where there were 10 incidents, all of which were assaults. One incident involved a gun discharge into an apartment. 6 of those assaults were domestic disturbances. The second highest concentration of violent crime occurred further north in the residential area between Louisiana Ave and Burton Street community, with a few incidents along Patton Avenue. This overall region that sits between these 3 areas had 8 incidents, 7 of which were assaults and 1 indecent exposure. Only 2 of those were domestic disturbances. As for property crime, the highest concentration occurred from Haywood Road down to Piscoview Apartments east of I-240. Within Piscoview, there was 10 property crimes, most of which were residential burglary. A very active street in this region was Pennsylvania Ave, where there was 2 motor vehicle beatings, 2 thefts, and 1 nearby residential burglary, all within 1 block. 3 commercial burglaries occurred along the eastern portion of Haywood Road. Part of this activity has been tied to 1 offender that was also active in central Asheville, who has since been detained. And then Malvern Hills Park experienced a slight increase in vehicular crime in the southernmost portion, and then the residents around there had several unsecured bikes stolen and businesses were burglarized. Smaller spots to look at is the Westgate shopping area, Amboy Road near Carrier Park, not in Carrier Park, where we're seeing vehicular activity along Amboy Road, New Leicester Highway near the Meadows Apartment, and then exit 44. Next, moving on to North Asheville. We've remained consistent, 74 incidents both in July and August. We've seen increased incidents of fraud and stolen motor vehicles. The motor vehicles mostly along Merriman Avenue. There's been reductions of robbery of individuals, residential burglaries, and motor vehicle beatings. The highest concentration of violent crime was in the southern portion of Montfort neighborhood, where there were 7 incidents, including 1 robbery and 6 assaults. And Hillcrest, there were 4 assaults, including 1 gunshot victim and another incident involving intimidation with a firearm. As for property, most of the property crime occurred along Merriman Avenue, mostly within the 5 Points neighborhood. There was 12 property crimes in this area, 2/3 of which targeted vehicles. For Central Asheville, overall there was a 7% decline. Most significant decline was in theft, residential burglary, and stolen vehicles. However, we've seen increases in commercial burglary and motor vehicle beating. As I mentioned, the offenders have been detained, but it was particularly in the River Arts District, where we saw a high volume of commercial burglaries, and then the motor vehicle beatings mostly downtown and in the South Slope area. For violent crime, highest concentration downtown, particularly within 500 feet of Pritchard Park, where there's been 1 sex offense, 2 robberies, and 6 assaults. As for property, it's also downtown, but further north of Pritchard Park. The hotspot centers on the Haywood Street and Walnut Street intersection, where there have been 10 property crimes, 6 of which were motor vehicle beatings. In East Asheville, we've seen a significant increase in crime, with a 28% overall rise. Most significant increases in simple assaults, commercial burglary, shoplifting, and vehicular crime. The commercial burglaries along Tunnel Road and Biltmore Village, shoplifting is at the mall, and vehicular crime is along Swananoa River Road and Beverly Road, which is in Hall Creek. The violent crime is concentrated in along South Tunnel Road, where there's been 1 indecent exposure, 1 robbery, and 6 assaults. 2 of the assaults took place at the mall. There's a smaller cluster of activity around the VA hospital, where there's been 4 assaults and 1 robbery. Property crime, the highest concentration was around the Walmart off Swananoa River Road and extends south to Ledgewood Apartments. Excluding the shoplifting and fraud, which is extensive in this area, we have 18 property crimes, half of which were theft and nearly a quarter of which were burglary. Hall Creek saw a rise in vehicular crime, especially along Beverly Road. VA Hospital also saw a rise in property crime, vehicular crime, and theft. Otherwise, there's small clusters of activity, 2 along Tunnel Road and 1 in Kenilworth neighborhood. We've done extensive additional patrols because of neighborhood outreach. And then finally, in South Asheville, we've also seen an increase of 21%, particularly in motor vehicle BDs, theft, and burglary that extend across all of Asheville South. We've seen slight improvement in fraud. 3 hotspots for violent activity all occur within the central region of South Asheville, which we refer to as the Baker 4. In last month, there was 12 violent crimes in this area, 2 robberies, 10 assaults. 7 of those assaults, though, were domestic disturbances. And as far as property, most of which occurred along the southernmost portion of the Sweeten Creek Road, 6 property crimes, most of which were motor vehicle BDs. Any questions? South of Shiloh, I can show you over here. I will not do it.
Next thing on the agenda is the update of written consent policy. Ms. Campbell is here to give us that since the chief isn't here.
Do you mind if I say?
No, okay.
So good evening. As noted, my name is Deborah Campbell, and I'm serving the role as the city manager for the city of Asheville. And what I'd like to do is to provide you with an update on where we are with the written consent policy, but also to apologize for the chief not being able to be here. The little under weather, so go home and spread whatever you got around to the rest of the community. So you guys should thank me for that one. Okay, what I'd like to do, hopefully, as part of your agenda packet, you have 2 pieces of information. One is the one that I'm going to speak from, which is the draft written consent policy, and it's just for me and talking points that we have to place out. And then there is another piece of paper that says draft, which is actually the written consent policy as it stands today. And so what I'd like to do is to just kind of provide first some background, and I'm sure I'm a newbie. I've been here like this is my 9th month now, so you all probably have way more history about this and the need for this than me, but I'll just give you my best shot in terms of what I've learned over the 9 months that I've been here. So background in the draft policy, this was based on kind of some data-driven information that the Southern Coalition of Social Justice and NAACP and a couple of other organizations brought to City Council, provided some information about stops and searches, and there was definitely a disproportionate number of stops and searches being made on people of color in Asheville. The consent to search policy was proposed as a way to address particularly the issue of the searches. And the request was made that this would be in writing, And there were numerous meetings that were held, and I think this is about 18-month to 24-month discussion that you all have had regarding written consent. The interim city manager at the time was asked to work on this, and then I was hired, and I continued to work on this issue. And so, why do we need a draft written consent policy? And I think it is simply related to a lack of trust of APD. And we don't want you all to give us anything, we want to earn it. This will be hopefully a tool that will help us earn the level of trust that I think this community deserves. And quite frankly, I think APD wants to achieve. And so, what do we hope to achieve with written consent? Obviously, to reduce the number of people, especially of color, being stopped and searched without permission. Inform people of their rights, that is to refuse or consent to a search. We want to hold APD accountable for stops and especially searches. We want to define a consistent protocol for these kinds of stops. And I want to emphasize in particular that written consent is not in and of itself going to solve the issue of trust or a lack of trust of APD. It is a tool. There's lots of things that we know we've got to do in order to earn people's trust in Asheville. And I emphasize this and I say this because, again, being here 9 months, people have almost put too many eggs in this written consent basket in terms of being the panacea to solve all of these trust issues, and it's not. I think it's a tool. It is not the only tool that we're going to work on. We're going to work on training, and in fact, in order to roll this out in an appropriate manner, we need to do it in a way that we train the police officers, we also train the community in terms of understanding their rights as it relates to this policy. We want to use it again as a tool to improve and strengthen community trust in APD, Asheville Police Department, and the development of the policy. How did we get here? Worked with, as we said, a lot of groups. We thought, though, we had the majority of the data directing us to vehicle stops. So there's been concern about all kinds of searches that would apply to persons, like you're a pedestrian, to vehicles, residences, businesses, and property, and persons' possession or what they have immediately under their control. So there's been a range of areas that people have asked for written consent. Again, we think that data drives us to vehicle stops. However, I think the chief is studying it and working with his leadership team, as well as I guess the organizations that support, the professional organizations that support policemen, to try to get some feedback. And with my meetings, though, with NAACP and the Southern Coalition of Social Justice, we landed on a single narrow scope of vehicle stops. But again, I'm giving the chief the flexibility. You know, if you think it's warranted to go past that, because we've gotten lots of concern from other people in Asheville saying, particularly for pedestrians, we ought to expand the scope of this policy. Actually used the draft, which really didn't look this way. This has evolved. This is like a third draft of where we were. as part of the interview process for the chief of police. We asked questions about, what issues or concerns that you have with a consent to search policy. And in particular, this is one that we're proposing for Asheville. How would you implement it, and do you have any concerns about implementing it? And we had 10 candidates that were interviewed. During that time, we also, I was communicating back and forth with these organizations, SJ and NAACP, about the language. We revised it a little bit, and on the second interview, when we had narrowed it down to who we thought would be our final candidates, we put the written consent policy out to them again and said, do you have any issues, any concerns about implementing something of this nature? The chief that was selected said, absolutely not. This is how we would roll it out, and these are the concerns and issues that I think this policy could address. And so we are to the point now where the chief is still debating and deliberating and talking about, again, the scope of the policy, whether it would be pedestrians, whether it would be personal property, just a number of those things. But we hope to officially start training, particularly for officers, but also to get out to the community to say, here's the policy, here's how it will be implemented, and more importantly, here are your rights. Here are the things that when you are stopped, that you have the opportunity to do in terms of refusing. And something that I didn't say is that we will always have the body worn cameras on, so that there is double protection in terms of if the person says no, that's recorded. If the person says yes, that's recorded as well. So I will stop there to see if there are any questions, concerns. And by the way, we were at Human Relations Committee, and I apologize, there are lots of organizations in Asheville, and I may not get all the names correct, but in time, I promise you I will. Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay.
And as this policy is disseminated throughout the community, are there situations that would need to be explained that where consent is not required?
That's correct.
So we can differentiate between consent and no need for consent.
Right, and I don't know all of the police terminology and lingo, but if there's probable cause, I don't think that it is necessary to have written consent. And so I will, that's again, dictates the necessity of the training, and training both the police officer to know when to ask for written consent, but more importantly, having some level of understanding of the person that's stopped or whatever, that they know their rights, that, you know, we have probable cause and we don't have to get something in writing, or we don't, and we need something in writing.
So when do you expect this to happen?
We hope in the next 30 to 60 days for certain. I think 60 is at the outset. We hope that it can be sooner, because I know that the community has waited a while to get this policy at least instituted, adopted, or created within the police department, and then right now it's a matter of implementation and education.
For the actual consent to search form, I know it says that it will be archived in the evidence.com system, but I'm wondering, does the person get to keep a copy of that form? Are they provided with a copy of the form? That's a good question.
We probably don't have the answer to that, but I think that is a very good suggestion.
Just thinking in terms of accountability.
Absolutely. Such that if body worn camera goes off, the officer loses the sheet, there's a duplicate copy. It's a very good point. We'll make sure that's added and considered.
Thank you. I had two other questions really quick. The other question is that the form itself something that we could see in the rollout of this policy to see what the form looks like and like what people are signing and agreeing to,
Absolutely.
kind of thinking about folks who may have limited reading comprehension, like how complicated that form is, and getting to see that in the outrolling of the policy would probably be really helpful. And my only other question is with the like open information portal with all the police data, will the consent searches become a data point integrated into that website?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
So my question builds off what Jerry was asking about processing time in order to understand and interpret your rights. So what does that do to the time that the officer is spending with whoever is agreeing to be searched? And what does that do to overall time interaction with individuals that are?
And obviously, we don't know yet. I think we have a little bit of information because, I mean, APD is doing a little bit of written consent right now. Let's say a little bit. It's gonna take us time, and I think, that as we go through the training, that will help us understand better how this needs to be rolled out. It will inform the officers in particular. We just need a little time under our belt, and we definitely need to understand, protocol and consistent protocol so that all officers are, administering the policy and doing things consistently.
Sandy has a question.
Hey, first of all, I would like to thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
So the main invitations that you did want to impact this community and you are, but you've done things, Mr. Young, so I what you done, on the city council, because he speaks out a lot about things that are done. And Chief Bailey, I'm glad he agreed to the terms that you gave to him to be here in Asheville for us. And the human relations committee, that's phenomenal. And Asheville, we're special, because the only other place I was at that meeting will be in Durham, that they do this for the people. Okay, but as far as future vision, I would like to see, pedestrian written searches, because I, talk to a lot of people in the street, tourists, everybody. And there are a lot of those, containers that happen, and I would like to see the actual citizens be able to speak for, that need for pedestrian, written consent of pedestrians, and see that come to pass, if that's across the board, something that everybody is agreeing upon.
Sure. And certainly that is, a place that we would like to get to in terms of that pedestrian understanding their rights. The reason that I had, and I shouldn't even say it's in the past tense, I have some concerns about this is that until our officers are really trained on these kinds of interactions, an interaction with a pedestrian could be a much more volatile situation, and I don't want to create, more volatility to that exchange, that, encounter, until our officers really understand how to administer, this policy. So I'm concerned both about our officers, but I'm also concerned about the pedestrian as well. Just don't wanna add fuel to that exchange, that fire, because it could, erupt into something that we never intended to happen, just to get something either signed or that person refusing. you all for what you do, appreciate the work that you do, and we really need you all to help us be advocates for APD. I know there are such a stigma, there is potentially, and I'll just say it, there's history in Asheville. But I think that we are headed to a good place. And we're gonna need some time to build that trust. We're gonna use as many tools as we can in order to help strengthen and build that relationship. But I tell you, there is no better acknowledgement of what our APD do than having it come from an individual, that you expressing it to someone who puts a tremendous amount of faith and confidence in your words. So thank you for what you do, and appreciate you allowing me to share this with you. Thank you.
Moving on with that, next up is unfinished business. Updates on CPAC task force. I'll take the responsibility on this. This is one of the things as to why I am hoping for as the chair tonight. Because my plate is full and I haven't reached out to everyone to make sure that the task force has been established. So that is on me. So I hope that the next person in line for chair will pick that up and run with it. So the next thing would be to elect the new CPAC chair. Robert has let me know that he is wanting to withdraw his submission due to basically
Yes,
time.
so, yeah, I thought about it, I reconsidered, I have some personal things coming up in the next few months that I will need to focus my time and attention to. I think that, we owe it to the community to have a chair that can really focus and get the job done. So, and of course, I read what Blake submitted, and I felt it was strong, and I can support that. So, for the time being, I'd like to withdraw my name from consideration.
So that leaves Blake.
No one else wants to run?
It's all you, baby. So, Casey, that, do we even need to vote? Yes? Just for the record?
You can vote by consent, in other words, everybody agrees.
Does everyone agree? I agree, and we will nominate Blake to take over as chair.
I appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
Blake to be the chair, I'll remain as, vice chair. So, that takes care of that. Any new business?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I don't know when you all are gonna make the transition, I'm just gonna take over the meeting,
Whenever he feels like speaking.
but I'd like to interject for just a second to give a heads up. There have been, well, first off, before I go into what I'm gonna say, let me say this, I wanna thank this group, this is a different looking CPAC group than what I started with a couple of years ago. Of course, there's only one holdover. But I think this group has definitely found a sweet spot, so to say, a balance into how you all interact, and I like the way that this group interacts. Another group that I actually like that interacts is the Human Relations Commission. Robert mentioned Blake's submission that you all should all have the memorandum about a proposal for mediation. Last year, myself and a handful of council members went down to Raleigh to ask for specific powers for a civilian review board that would have done some of the same things that you're asking for, and those would have possibly been given to either a new body or the HRCA. With that being said, wanted to wait until the new chair was elected to see about getting you and the chair of HRCA together in order to start talking about how this group and that group can actually work together. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that group, some of you were at the community meeting a while back, but I'll just read you what HRCA does. The Human Relations Commission's duties include, but are not limited to, making policy recommendations to City Council which promote and improve human relations and advance equity in the city, supporting the city's Office of Equity and Inclusion, providing a forum where residents can raise issues and complaints relating to human relations in the city, engaging the community regarding the utilization of city-funded programs and policies for the promotion of human relations, and promoting and improving human relations and advance equity in the following areas. 1, public safety, educational, art and cultural opportunities, economic development, health and human services, and housing. So with that being said, what you all are wanting to do is trying to figure out where CPAC fits in the scope of the community, how it relates to the police. That is the same thing that City Council and boards and commissions were struggling with about a year ago when we got right all the way up to the gate of dissolving CPAC. I think I talked about that at the last meeting, and we didn't. We wanted to wait till HRCA got up and running, and we were wondering whether or not we were going to roll over what CPAC does into HRCA or let CPAC run on its own. Getting to this point, I think it is now at a time where HRCA has its legs up under them, and there might be a informal meeting between the chairs of HRCA and CPAC to see how these groups can work together. Not talking about dissolving anything or anything like that, but how can you all work together with the charge that has been given to the Human Relations Commission and what CPAC is trying to do and how they want to improve their focus. And once that comes together, maybe something may come out of it, maybe something won't, but I think it's imperative that before you all move forward with your memorandum, because, and I'll get into that a little bit, that it's imperative that you all have a communication, see where these two groups can fit in and work together, maybe even possibly have a joint meeting, and go from there. As it pertains to this memorandum, I spoke with the city attorney today. I'd have to talk with him again, but I think it would be good to also have him sit down with us at a meeting, myself included in the two chairs, and talk about, what you guys are trying to do, and then those chairs bring that information back to both groups separately and figure out how you're gonna go from there. But the city attorney mentioned that, there's some things that we struggled with when we went down to the legislature to try to do something like this, whether it be some sort of civilian review or mediation or whatever. And one of it is, and I'm gonna put words in his mouth and I'll let him say it himself, but I'll kind of paraphrase, you don't have any subpoena power, so you can't really make anybody come and involve themselves in your process. It's great that, you would want someone to try to do that, but you don't really have the power to make somebody do that. So those are some things that y'all will have to work out as you discuss that, but I wanna connect with Blake, after the meeting and set up a time for him and the chair of HRCA to sit down and see where they can come together, and for these two separate bodies to deliberate amongst themselves how they wanna interact. And that way, council doesn't have to say, we wanna dissolve CPAC, or we wanna roll you all into something else. We want you all to figure out what's the best course of action and how to make both of these groups work for the community at large. So that's my 2 cents and updates, and we'll get together after the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Keith, appreciate that. Greatly appreciate that.
One question, for our edification, because Raleigh gets into it, the state gets into it, you guys are dealing with these issues. It sort of seems like the commission versus a committee, and how do, they are different entities, they're different animals. And I just know that they're a different name, and the charges read differently, so any help in helping us to understand that would be great.
I think when you start talking about, well, first off, let's make it easy. Forget about whether it's a committee or it's a commission. It's all based on what the ordinance states you can do. There's an ordinance for HRCA that states what they do. There are some things that state what you all do. I think the best thing for you all to move forward is to decide what is it that you want to do. And if you're working with a group like HRCA, they can help you do it. If you choose to let them help you do it. And so, as opposed to thinking about what is the definition of committee and commission, try to figure out what is it that we're trying to accomplish for the community. What is it that we're trying to accomplish as a commission, as a board, as a committee? Why are we here? And then just forget about the definition of committee and commission, just figure out what you're trying to do. I know that kind of sounds like a roundabout answer, but it's just how it is. one more thing.
Yes.
I wanna thank Shauna for being the chair and stepping in after Allison's departure and doing a really good job. She was here when when we were down at Grand Center one fateful night, and she stepped in there and did a good job. And so I just wanna thank all of you all for serving and doing what you do, but specifically for Shauna for stepping into the role of chair. And I know Blake is gonna do a great job as well. I know Blake from my day job, and being an attorney and seeing him. I don't see him as much as now, but I know you'll do a great job. And I just wanna say thank you, Shauna, for stepping up, and I hope you, continue to serve with the group. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
No,
I'm sorry, Sean.
Hey, Gary, I have some questions. So, there was a video, and I'm sure you've seen it, the video of the incident that happened in Newview, when it was recorded inside of the home, when the police showed up and went into the house on probable cause because of a well-person check, is what it was said. My question, not about the video, because there were some incidents in there as well, but my question is, with so many products containing CBD that smell just like marijuana, when are we gonna drop the probable cause as far as I smell marijuana?
That is a question that the chiefs and chief associations and the state, the legislatures are all trying to figure out, because the court's standard is still there. So with that, there is a lot of, legal, lawyers that are getting involved with it. The chiefs are all across North Carolina and the United States are all struggling with that right now. I think the legislature is trying to, move forward in that direction. So we've had some discussions with our level city staff, city attorney, our involved at this time. We're still researching and trying to find the best practice, but it's something that every agency, especially right now in North Carolina, is struggling with. We had the hemp festival going on in downtown. We learned some issues with our regulation of enforcement of smoking within the downtown business district, also inside the parks, where hemp is not considered tobacco products and can't be outlawed under the current program. So there are a lot of things the city staff is looking at this time.
Okay, and I ask that because when we look at marijuana and by percentage, we look at black people, white people who's arrested for it. We look at that as marijuana has been used as a way to, not stereotype, but profile, thank you. I feel like a 5-year-old there. To profile people in the community. So, and I ask that because I don't have a clue, but does opioids, does that have a smell? Does, like, are there other drugs that are probable cause other than seeing a hypodermic needle? Or, seeing actual handoff of a drug sale?
Right.
And I think the community has been like really, really concerned with the fact that now we have these CBD oil products or, this stuff that it's legal, it doesn't have THC, but it smells just like weed or it's just like weed.
We are following up, we do have, our legal staff working with us, and like I said, this is something that the chiefs associations are working through, trying to find. I think that, SBIC investigation is heading up, and also, so hopefully something in the next couple of months will have some form of direction at the state level also.
And is there like a test, is there a test that a kit that officers carry the way they carry for cocaine or?
Yes
Purpose
and no.
of it?
Yes and no. There are field kits, but we still have to send off to the state. And there are timeframes where the field kit, you can't get what's called cooperative. So there are always the testing process that we do send things off to the statewide for final, sorting purposes. And then again, I don't know how the hemp testing, I don't know how that was coming to play. Like I said, the marijuana and the hemp is the difference in the THC levels. So this is something new we're all dealing with right now.
homelessness. I guess someone who works directly with them, the majority of people currently homeless are not dangerous or violent. The vast majority of them are not. The vast majority of them are highly traumatized folks who are lacking in resources. So I don't think, and just looking at the crime data that we see about violent crime downtown, concentrated in Pritchard Park, I think that area is already heavily policed, and there's already lots of law enforcement there, and I don't think we're gonna arrest our way out of the housing crisis that we have in our community. I think housing is the solution to that, not policing, but it did seem to raise a lot of questions from community members about foot patrol from officers and not seeing foot patrol downtown or in other areas, and it seemed to raise a lot of questions about that, so it did kind of pique my curiosity about just general policy around foot patrol or kind of y'all's perspective on that. I think we have plenty of foot patrol personally.
The downtown footprint, the officers are a little more visible because of the downtown business area. They're wearing the yellow bike shirts, and they also patrol bicycles and things along those lines. But each district does have what we call checks or foot patrol, crime prevention, where we do it. Each district submits a monthly report, and the numbers are checked by the district planner, control planner. So we do encourage officers to get out of the cars, get out, get into communities. We do put a huge emphasis in our housing authority areas where they are coming in and working in those, walking and getting to know the community in those areas. So we do encourage it. We emphasize it heavily in the downtown business because we do for them to walk to a cost sometimes and get that out of the marketplace. So each district's going to be unique in the areas that they do focus their foot patrols in. So each district is unique in the way the crimes and things like that. So the district managers have to be unique in where they do have the officers get out and get on patrol.
Gotcha. Within each district, like I hear you saying that they're encouraged to do foot patrol, but are there any specific requirements about the number of officers or how many hours those number of officers are on foot patrol, like hard numbers in each district, or is it just like encouragement?
We have to look at, we've gone back and forth a little bit over time with foot patrol, and I think the mandate that we require is we want each officer to at least have an hour each shift on foot patrol somewhere. Now some days each officer might have more than that, but just as a baseline, what we'd like to see each officer get out of the vehicle at least 1 hour during the shift and go to the office. And it can be multiple, walking tours in different locations to equal up to an hour. It's not just 1 hour locked in one particular location. We want to be highly visible in any areas as we can.
Thank you. Thank you. Jeremy, you're new, but you want to say anything?
One question I was processing and thinking about with the written consent policy. If a probable cause eliminated the need for this, why would someone want to search if it wasn't a probable cause?
I'm sorry, I was processing, but I didn't hear all of the questions. I'm sorry, can you repeat it?
So if there's probable cause, you don't need a written consent. But why would there be a need for a search if there wasn't probable cause?
There are various cases where an officer might have what's called reasonable suspicion, but there is not enough to carry it into that probable cause. So when an officer asks him to consent, it could be where information they have where it's leading to the path of probable cause, but it stops at reasonable suspicion. So the officer has a question or a thought process that the person could be engaged in some type of legal activities, which could be why the officer is stopping to detain the individual and asking for consent to search.
So, and maybe what I'm thinking is that clarification in that distinction between the two, from the communication standpoint of why this would even be necessary. So I very much believe in sort of the understanding of why, and if we can interpret the distinction between the two, what would distinguish that reasonable suspicion to probable cause?
That actually is in the stop policy, if I'm not mistaken, where it lists reasonable suspicion, probable cause and all of that. But yes, in communicating this, we can do a better job of explaining.
Sure.
Yeah.
What the difference is.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sam?
have a victim services coordinator who works out of the main office, but we also have one of our victim service coordinators who's also assigned to the Family Justice Center. So we have a staff that we also fall back up with crime victims to assist them through the process and help them with reimbursement and things along those lines.
The last thing I have, is about child safety in the city. Because I actually had spoken with a lady who tried to look up a child a couple weeks ago. What came of that?
I'd have to go back and look and see what the court case is. I know, there's one that part,
Splashville.
she was charged, and this, once we make the charge, that's in the hand of the district attorney's office. So we'll have to go back and consult with the district attorney to see what the status of that case is.
Okay, she's currently, sitting on benches right there. still.
She wasn't charged with kidnapping. I don't know what the charge was, but it was a kidnapping.
Some child.
Yeah.
Yeah, still not good. And that goes along, to, safety for children, because there's trafficking, everywhere. We're a tourist town, and, we need to keep, our kids and tourist kids safe. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Good. Public comment? Anyone sign up or speak?
Michael and Carol.
Yes, Mr. Chair, before you go to public comment, can I circle back around to the comment that was made earlier? Shauna brought up a point. I wanted to give you all a resource. UNC School of Government is a resource that, help, local governments in North Carolina and public policy makers. They give them advice. They're kind of like a think tank, kind of to use. And so I was saying, Shauna asked about the probable cause on hemp. The State Bureau of Investigations sent a memo to the General Assembly sometime at the top of the year. I'm not sure if they've recanted that memo or made a new memo. This is the only one that I could find. But for your information, based on her question, I'll read a brief portion of the memo, and I'll send a link to the School of Government where you can find that as it pertains to hemp and probable cause. Real quick, I know everybody's probably ready to go. Give me just 1 second. So, hemp and marijuana look the same, have the same odor, both burn and unburn. This makes it impossible for law enforcement to use the appearance of marijuana to develop probable cause for an arrest, seizure of an item, or probable cause for a search warrant. In order for law enforcement to seize and analyze an item, the officer must have probable cause that the item being seized is evidence of a crime. The proposed legislation, there was some legislation earlier in the year, the proposed legislation makes possession of hemp legal in any form. Therefore, in the future, when law enforcement encounters plant material that looks and smells like marijuana, she will no longer have probable cause to seize and analyze the item because the probable cause to believe it is evidence of a crime will no longer exist. And then it goes down to state that like canine dogs can't tell the difference. The memo also states that without field tests or some other way to verify if something is hemp or marijuana, officers do not have probable cause to seize it or to arrest someone in possession of it without some other reason to believe the substance is contraband, which means there might be times when law enforcement can develop probable cause based in part of odor and appearance, but they also need something else. In other words, like you tell them it's marijuana, or a suspect might admit the substance is definitely marijuana, or there are other signs that, like someone's high or something like that. So don't take my words for it. I'll send it to the group. You can look at it. You can go to the UNC School of Government, look at the memo, and then you can research and see if there's been any other advances on how the State Bureau of Investigation used that. And they sent that to the legislature. And so they're still, the legislature's still working on that, as stated earlier. But don't take my word for it. I'll send it to everybody.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that.
Wait, can I have one more thing before public comment? I just wanted to jump back to Sandy's question about what APD does to help survivors of domestic violence, and just wanted to acknowledge the lethality assessment protocol that y'all also have when they get a call from a victim of domestic violence. It triggers a series of evidence-based questions from a national tool and automatically connects them voluntarily if they choose to also get connected with helping immediately. they have a really effective protocol to get survivors connected to resources super quickly. So just wanted to acknowledge that too, because I've seen it work.
Now, I forgot the last time I mentioned there needs to be a task force, another campaign like enough campaign, I think it's necessary.
They are working on another campaign and stuff.
Okay.
Thank you all. Michael?
Michael Beach from Oakley. Sorry I missed last month. I was up in New Hampshire being a granddad. So I do want to just circle back and make sure that folks are reminded of that Center for Investigative Reporting report identifying 2 officers in Asheville who were involved in racist and white supremacist websites. And just trying to make sure that that doesn't disappear from thought. Then I do have 2 questions on consent. One would be, does probable cause for a search attach to something like a stop for tail light in and of itself? Does the stop because you have a broken tail light automatically mean it's a probable cause type of possible search? And will consent searches require 2 officers to do the search, one to do the search and one to assure the safety of the individual and perhaps observe the search? Just things that aren't really clear. And then finally, I'm really interested in the idea of reasonable suspicion versus probable cause, what that definition really is.
Those are legal definitions, so yeah.
Yeah, and I've never heard of reasonable suspicion. And then I guess then the last question I have is, with the crime report, are the percentages that he states of increase or decrease in the statistics related to prior month or prior year?
They're both in the numbers that you, but, so, excuse me. So he's got August 2018 and August 2019, changed from last month, and then July 2019, August 2000, changed from last month, and then the percent changed from last month. So the increases in the percentage are just from last month, but he gave the prior year as a reference that you can use. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
That might be good. Is anyone else searching?
The regulars. I appreciate it. My primary interest, and Keith, you have addressed it in some measure, is looking at the role of CPAC and the Human Relations Commission. Keith referenced the fact that a year or so ago there was discussion about whether or not to dissolve CPAC, and as one of the people who addressed that concern at that time, and perhaps a continuing concern, is whether a body that has a broad mandate like the Human Relations Commission does can focus sufficiently on issues related to law enforcement and APD. And I would encourage that there be some continuing conversation among the current members of CPAC around that, while pursuing the offer that he has put forward for some shared conversation. I would also encourage that perhaps CPAC extend an invitation to the city attorney to directly come before this group and engage in some discussion rather than having that triangulated. This question about mediation and like, I've not seen your document, but the suggestion that somehow subpoena power and the absence of subpoena power would impair the ability to mediation. Mediation is by definition a voluntary process, unlike arbitration, unlike some other dispute resolution mechanisms. So that would alone not be a reason for a proposal for mediation to one more observation. I'm wondering, I mean, it's terrific that there are crime statistics that are coming forward monthly, and I commend CPAC and the department for doing that. I would like to encourage that in the future, that in response to those reports, that there be an operational response. So the so what question, when all these numbers come out, what does that mean for what the department is doing within the districts that are impacted in response to those numbers? I think it would be a helpful way of considering what's different. Is there an informational role for CPAC